Good afternoon. Welcome to the 8th PHARMECO webinar. And this time the webinar will be on environmental and socio-economic assessments in the new SSbD framework. My name is Sarah Kosters. I'm affiliated to Ghent University and I'm the coordinator of PHARMECO. I am today stepping in for Nina Melander, who is from the Research Institute Sweden, from the RISE Institute. And today we are very happy to have here with us Giulio Bracalente. He is a member of the European Commission Joint Research Center on Sustainable Supply Chains and Bioeconomy. Giulio has quite some responsibilities, but he's also a technical coordinator of the SSbD framework. Now, today, I will briefly say a few words on the PHARMECO project itself, but then I will rapidly give the floor to Giulio, and he will introduce us very briefly to the SSbD framework, and then we'll elaborate a bit more on the environmental and socio-economic sustainability assessments for the SSbD. Normally, at the end of the webinar, we should still have time for some questions and answers. So if during the webinar you have some questions popping up, please add them in the chat. And during the talk of Giulio, I will collect the questions, and during the Q&A, I will filter out some of the questions to raise them to Giulio, and he will then, together with the GRC team that is also present today, try to address as good as possible the questions you have. All right, but let's first start with the PHARMECO projects. PHARMECO is a public-private partnership co-funded by the European Union and the UKRI and the private partners of the Innovative Health Initiative joint undertaking. As the PHARMECO project was actually started at the end of 2024, really to address some of the resilience challenges in European pharmaceutical manufacturing. Because we all know that conventional manufacturing of active pharmaceutical ingredients, that often relies on suboptimal processes using outdated technologies, and hence relying on massive amounts of solvents and water, consuming really a lot of energy and generating massive amounts of waste. And this, of course, comes with a serious environmental footprint, but it also comes with quite some operational costs for pharmaceutical manufacturers, and also with it also puts pharmaceutical manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies at operational risks. So that's why the PHARMECO project wants to accelerate the adoption of safe and sustainable by design principles in pharmaceutical manufacturing practices. And we do that by, for example, already developing methodologies for SSbD aligned route design and process selection for synthesis of active pharmaceutical ingredients. But we also mature SSbD aligned innovative technologies for synthesis of small molecules, tides, biologics, etc., from lab scale to pilot scale. So that's the next step is then actually implementation in industry practices. Next to that, we are also working on a standardized, widely accepted methodology for sustainability assessments. So as you can see, PHARMECO is a quite ambitious project, but to fulfill all these objectives, we have brought together 31 international partners, mostly in Europe, and it's nicely heterogeneous. So you have the knowledge institutes working together with small to mid-sized enterprises, governmental institutes, but we also have the pharma and biopharma partners, even medtech partner, that actually represents the end user group of solutions that will be developed within PHARMECO. So the PHARMECO project, well, it's driven by the SSbD concept, so the way of thinking, And that's why we're very happy to have today here Giulio presenting the SSbD framework and focusing then on the environmental and social sustainability assessment aspects. So I will now give the floor to Giulio. And please, if you have questions during the talk of Giulio, put them in the chat. I will collect them and then we will address them at the end of the session. All right, Giulio, the floor is yours. I will stop sharing.
Thanks a lot, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for the invitation. So let me share my screen. And if you can confirm that you can see the screen, please.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect.
So once again, welcome everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Giulio Bracalente. I work in the Unit D3 in New Jersey, Sustainable Supply Chain and Bioeconomy. And in this webinar, as anticipated, I will try to introduce the framework, to provide an overview, also for the ones that are less familiar, and then go a little bit more in the detail of the environmental sustainability assessment and the socioeconomic assessment that, of course, are based on LCA and the social LCA mostly. So, few words regarding the Joint Research Center, which is a science and knowledge service of the European Commission, and supporting so the EU policy making. We are based. Our unit is based in Ispra, together with the other unit, which is safety technology, F2 units, which is also cooperating with us with the framework. And as I said, we are based in Ispra. There are other sites spread in Europe, and the framework is also has been supported by DGs in Brussels, including RTD, DG GROW, and DG ENV. Said that, we can start with the policy context of the SSbD. Since let's say the release of the framework in 2022, the Safe and Sustainable by Design framework was a specific action plan of the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, developed under the Green Deal, to promote the different ambitions like zero pollution, climate neutrality, and circular economy. Let's say the new revision of the framework has followed also the evolution of the policy, including, for example, bioeconomy and circular economy strategy, the Chemical Industry Action Plan, the Biotech Act, and other the competitiveness compass, the Clean Industrial Deal. So all different pieces of legislation where the SSbD can play a role. Also, a brief history of the evolution of the SSbD that, as you can see in this very packed slide, yes, the first release was in 2022, and it follows 2 years of operationalization, 3 years of operationalization, where we had also the opportunity to release the first methodological guidance, to receive feedback during the different testing period, to have also exchange and training session, let's say, through the with stakeholders through the different bootcamp. And the last one was organized in Ispra in October last year. And now we are, let's say, ended the operationalization phase with the release of the revised framework in December of 2025, and the release of the revised recommendation in last month, let's say. And in the next month, we release also the revised methodological guidance. So very briefly, for the ones who are less familiar with the framework, this is a voluntary approach to steer innovation towards safer and more sustainable chemicals material, keeping a life cycle perspective. And this is also can support the competitiveness of the European economy. And the revised framework that I have introduced in the previous slide maintain the main features, but introduce new elements. And these new elements has been elaborated, taking into account both the policy evolution, but also the feedback received during the operationalization period. And okay. These figures summarize which is the structure of the revised SSbD framework. This picture is taken from the European recommendation SSbD released in March or February 2026. And so, as I said, the main features as remains in the revised framework. So we can see the iterative and tiered nature of the framework. So the concept remains the same. So the actions that are defined together with the intended innovation. All these actions that are defined in the innovation have to be evaluated from the safety and sustainability perspective, in order to spot and prevent possible trade-off between safety and sustainability aspect. This is the core concept of the framework. As we can see from the picture, the starting point is indeed the intended innovation and the application of the redesign principle. Then it comes the scoping analysis, which is an element that was already introduced in the methodological guidance that now has been, say, included formally in the framework. In the scoping, let's say the intended innovation is contextualized within the framework itself. So it is are defined indicators, are defined also decision-making rules to follow up the innovation process. As outcome of the scoping analysis, different scenario can be defined, different scenario that tailor the assessment phase to the specificity of the innovation process, taking in consideration all the SSbD principles that are defined. And then it's the safety and sustainability assessment, where again the safety and sustainability performance of the innovation action are evaluated. And finally, we have the evaluation and the documentation. The documentation is also something new that we have proposed in the revised framework to allow, let's say, also the communication of the information related to the assessment inside the organization, but also along the supply chain. So moving ahead with starting to focus a little bit on the assessment, as we can see from this slide, we have essentially this is the assessment as two main blocks. On the left side, we have the safety assessment that has been restructured in the current in the revised framework, but keep the major elements that are proper of the safety assessment, which are of course the hazard assessment and the exposure and the risk assessment. While on the right side of the figures, we have the sustainability assessment that will be the focus of the next slides. And regarding the sustainability assessment, we have the environmental sustainability assessment and the socioeconomic assessment that was also an element that was already, let's say, included and mentioned in the previous framework. We further elaborate in first methodological guidance, and with the revision of the framework, it has been, let's say, formally included in the assessment. So, with regard to the environmental sustainability assessment, with this slide, I just wanted to show how it is it evolved since the first version of the framework. So, in the framework of 2022, we focused on aspects and indicators that are needed to perform an environmental sustainability assessment, and also we defined the criteria and evaluation system. In the follow, let's say, release of the methodological guidance in 2024, we introduced one very important element that is present in the revised framework, which is the tiered approach in the SSbD. So we focused on the innovation process, and we introduced the tiered LCA. So by defining system boundaries, data collection, and interpretation. With the revised framework, we reinforced the tiered LCA approach within the environmental sustainability assessment, developing also reference and classes of performance to support, of course, the assessment itself. And we further developed the tiered approach. In the upcoming methodological guidance that will be released likely by June 2026, let's say, at least this is the expectation, we will further provide examples related to the application of the references that we have developed in the revised framework, and that we will touch in the next slides. So, which are the key aspects of the environmental sustainability assessment in the SSbD? Let's say the life cycle assessment methodology is the methodology that support the environmental sustainability assessment. So, and this methodology, of course, allow to identify hotspots along the life cycle of chemicals and material. For example, to improve the processes or understand how perform different feedstock, for example. And it is essentially a function-based LCA. Again, another key element is the tiered approach, so that allow to follow the maturity of the innovation. And we propose 4 different levels, let's say, of LCA, starting from the screening till the full LCA, depending on the level of the innovation and the availability of data and knowledge of the system. When the full LCA is performed, we suggest to apply the method recommended by European Commission, which is the environmental footprint method, and specifically the PEF, so the product environmental footprint. Few words regarding the life cycle assessment that, as probably most of you know, is a standardized and comprehensive and also, we say, qualitative methodology that is used to assess and evaluate the environmental impact or burden of a certain product or service throughout its entire lifespan. So from the raw material extraction till the end of life. So it's called cradle to grave. It is standardized methodology that defined by ISO 4040 and 4044, and it consists of four main steps. So first of all, the goal and scope, where product system and the system boundary are defined, and of course also the functional unit is defined. So the what that will be the reference of the impacts that will be evaluated. Then it comes the life cycle inventory stage, where for each stage of the product, the resource and also the outputs flows have to be listed. Then it's come the steps of the environmental assessment. So for each flows, by applying characterization factors, the impact for 16 impact categories is evaluated. And then it's the final part of the interpretation, where the result from the impact assessment can be also aggregated, and the impact for different area of protection can be understood. So I mentioned the tiered approach that we have proposed for environmental sustainability assessment, and here we can see the four different steps, the four different, let's say, tiered that we are proposing. So starting from a screening assessment that it focuses really on the production process and single operation. So this can be done at very early stage, where there is a lack of data that prevents the performing of an LCA, but still could be available information related to the process. And this can allow at least to identify early hotspots, let's say, but of course with a limited system boundary. Moving and progressing in the innovation process, more data can become available, for example, from laboratory, but maybe the final application of the chemicals can be still unknown. In this case, it will be possible to apply simplified LCA, for example, by using a cradle to gate approach, so staying in the perimeter of the plant, and moving ahead with the innovation process and availability of data, involvement of different actors in the value chain. It could be possible to apply an intermediate LCA, so also trying to elaborate scenario related to the final application of the chemicals, and so enlarging the system boundaries. And at the end, let's say before the at higher TRL, it would be possible to perform a full LCA. Sorry. So, let's say for each of these tiered, what is needed when an environmental sustainability assessment is performed is to understand how the innovation perform regarding. So, how can I understand how better I'm performing regarding the environmental sustainability, for example? What is needed, of course, is to define references. And because of the, let's say, comparative nature of this kind of methodology. So what we have elaborated in the revised framework are indeed the reference values that can be applied to compare the result of the assessment. And together with these reference values, we've also elaborated a class of performances that inform the practitioner how well, again, the innovation is performing. This can be based kind of as criteria. So based on this criteria, it will be possible to take also decision along the innovation process. Which are the references that we have that we have developed take into consideration the different tiered of the that I have explained before. We may have proxy values that can be applied as cleaning level when, as said, process parameter can be only available. So this kind of reference can allow a comparison of the process parameters to understand how well the innovation perform. This can be applied at very low tier level. And then when applying the simplified or intermediate LCA, we developed a benchmark that following the definition that provided in the pathway, they refer to the average environmental performance of a chemical. We will see later a little bit more in the detail. And then at the end, when the full LCA is applicable, it is possible to use as a reference a representative system that is more, of course, more comprehensive and allow a comparison when a full LCA is applied. Overarching all these three references, we also propose a desired target. So it will be possible, for instance, to set a target of 30% of reduction of resource use, comparing to the reference that one can choose for the assessment. Sorry, I just need to. So, regarding the derivation, one of the three references that I have introduced, I just wanted to focus a little bit on the benchmark. So, as said, we proposed benchmark in the revised framework, and we developed basing on best available technologies reference based on the reference document of the best available technologies for large volume organic chemicals. So we started our analysis on the data related to this type of chemicals, and in the following step, we calculated the average impact value for the production in a cradle-to-gate approach of 1 kilogram of each of these chemical, relying on EF 3.1 method, and we defined this average impact by means of quartiles and maximum value. And by doing this, we were able to identify different classes of performances that we can see in this small figure that I will share later in a bigger slide. So, for example, here we can see how the different class of chemicals that we have identified as benchmark perform regarding the climate change, for example. So when applying, for example, a simplified or intermediate LCA, it would be possible to compare the results of the assessment for our chemicals comparing to this benchmark. So in this case, we can see how our chemical would position comparing to the benchmark. In this case, it will have a higher impact compared to the CO2 equivalent emission, so regarding the climate change. And so we would be able to assign a certain class of performance, in this case, not performing very well, to this chemical. The same can be done for all the 16 impact categories because the benchmark has been defined for all the 16. impact categories. So this is an overview of one specific reference that we have developed. Moving ahead, and this is, I think, my last slide regarding the environmental sustainability assessment. I wanted to mention that in the revised framework, we have also developed what we call the process-related sustainability assessment. So still under the environmental sustainability assessment, we propose an assessment that focuses on specific process. So an assessment that can be applied to a specific industrial plant, for example, that still following a tiered approach can allow the early identification of hotspots based very similar to the screening assessment that we have seen before. But then when, let's say, site-specific information became available and the technology and the process become more, let's say, progress, let's say, in the higher TRL, it will be possible to focus more on, let's say, process, but also environmental pressure indicators. And at the end, also to understand which are the potential site-specific impact that can be associated to that specific technology and that specific process. And this somehow align with more than with LCA, with the environmental impact assessment methodology that are the one where that support, for example, environmental permitting policies and schemes. So this is say a specific assessment that we have introduced in the revised framework with the intention to support, again, also the early identification of possible hotspot when, for example, a new technology is developed and it is applied. This can be, for example, applied also to biotechnology, because the concept here is broader than can embrace also different kind of stress and different kind of impact. So this was my last slide. I hope I am still in time. And now I would move not quickly, but I will give you also an overview of the socioeconomic assessment within the safe and sustainable by design. So also in this case, the concept of socioeconomic assessment was already present in the first the framework of 2022, and it was more and more developed in the following document, including the case study that were released in 2023, but even more with the methodological guidance, and finally in the revised framework, it has been formalized as part of the assessment. And these, of course, supported by the revised recommendation that was released a few months ago. So the socioeconomic analysis is in the safe and sustainable by design framework is composed essentially by two main pillars. So on one side, we have the social fairness. So the socioeconomic analysis is able to steer innovation towards producing societal benefits, but also ensuring equal opportunities, health and safety, fair working condition, and respect of human rights. So these are the elements that are evaluated under the social fairness. On the other side, and so the other pillar that supports the socioeconomic assessment is the competitiveness. So by applying this assessment, it can be possible to understand the vulnerabilities of the supply chain, for example, in case of critical presence of critical raw material, but also improving the preparedness and also the risk management of this risk, so to ensure to prevent possible supply chain disruption, for example, and financial security. And so this is essentially how the socioeconomic assessment, which are the objective of the socioeconomic sustainability assessment. But from a methodological perspective, we can let's say that this type of assessment is based on three main elements. So starting from the left side of the slide, by applying the social life cycle assessment, so a social LCA, it is possible to identify social risk and performances. And here, in this context, we also it is also possible to score our performance in terms of risk and opportunity. The other methodology, let's say, that is applied is a criticality assessment that allow that building on let's say a list of chemicals and the materials that are present in our system, and focusing mostly, I would say, in the supply chain. It allows the screening and flagging, for example, of critical raw materials in the supply chain. And the last methodology that is applied in this assessment is the societal cost, and allow the monetization of the externalities, and also a comparative evaluation among different, let's say, different alternatives that can be in the scope of the assessment of the SSbD framework. This slide is just to remind that within the social LCA, and I think this is something that is important also in the context of the research and innovation process in the pharmaceutical sector, accounting for positive impacts is possible. The UNEP guidelines on social LCA identify three different types of positive impacts. One of these, which is the type C, which is about positive social impact through product utility, is particularly interesting, but still a little bit under discussion, I would say. In our framework, we identify, let's say, the other two types of positive impact that can be considered. So the type A, which is about positive social performance, going beyond the business as usual, and the type B, which is about positive social impact through presence. These two kinds of impact can be accounted in the social LCA that we proposed in the framework, with the possibility to include and propose specific indicators. And so to wrap up, there are added value in applying the socioeconomic assessment within the LCA, because it certainly supports the innovation uptake by demonstrating social and market value. It can help to identify contribution to the EU policy objective. We provided the example of competitiveness, but also resilience, and can certainly, and it is a support for decision making, because it allows to identify trade-off between risk and benefits. There are, of course, also risks and challenges related to the application of the socioeconomic assessment. First of all, related to the availability of social data and lack of a consolidated methodology. There is also the risk of claims, let's say, without sufficient verification, and yeah, so there are both benefits, let's say, and risk related to the application of this assessment, but we really think that can be an added value in the context of the sustainability assessment. And my last slide related to the SSbD framework. This is a figure that we are currently working on, but I wanted to anticipate here that let's say the evaluation from my point of view is the fundamental step in the framework. So it follows the safety and sustainability assessment. So we have on the left side of the figures the different dashboards that we propose, that we also proposed in the revised framework, that allow to graphically identify where possible hotspots are present in the different life cycle stage of the chemicals. We have the dashboard that allow to identify the progress of our innovation. So how the specific redesign and the related indicators are performing. But we also recognize that there are other aspects that are proper of each research and innovation process that are more based on functionality, but also technical feasibility or profitability, that are not part of the SSbD framework, but in an evaluation and decision-making process have to be taken into account, of course. So the evaluation that we proposed in the framework and the different approaches that are available to deal with trade-off and support the decision-making are explained in the framework, and somehow have to consider all these different aspects, taking into consideration that is one of the fundamentals of the SSbD concept, that the trade-off between safety and sustainability aspect should be avoided, of course. And the result of the evaluation should be documented within the organization or within the value chain. And I think with this slide, I have concluded my overview of the framework. I just wanted to touch and to highlight the importance of this. Here I've tried to summarize some of the articles that we went through when preparing this webinar. And so I highlight the importance of this type of research project and partnership that, from my point of view, aims to integrate the framework, the SSbD framework, into a well-established and regulated sector, such as the pharmaceutical sector. Starting from the evidences that while the pharmaceutical are essential for the healthcare in our society, can also pose threats to the environment, both from the resource consumption perspective, but also from the perspective of, let's say, environmental risk related to the release of active compounds in the environment. So I see from the integration perspective that have been done many steps. From my point of view, what still have to be solved is the issue of the trade-off that is relevant for this specific type of product, because there are trade-offs that are not negotiable. And also other improvements, I think, have been done regarding methodological aspects. So I see that, for example, when thinking about the life cycle assessment applied to the pharmaceutical sector, of course, having characterization factor available for active compound is fundamental. So yes, this was my last slide. So I hope this presentation was comprehensive enough and clear to stimulate also the discussion. And a final thanks again for to all the GRC colleagues, but also to all the stakeholders and participants that were interested in the frame, that provided the input to the framework. This is a picture from the last bootcamp. And yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Giulio, for this very, very nice, very informative presentation. Also nicely within time, which is even more appreciated given the fact that we have quite some questions for you. Maybe in terms of questions, we can start with some very practical questions, 2 very practical questions, and then we dive more into the content, okay? Okay. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, no worries.
Okay, because Giulio seems a bit frozen, but I thought, okay,
I'm here, not in that position, but...
Okay, good, but you're there, that's excellent.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened.
So first practical question, this GRC database with benchmarks, where can they be found? Because it seems that there's quite an interest in these databases.
Well, there's not, I mean, actually a database but let's say the benchmark values are available in the annex of the framework, so can be consulted there.
Okay, so in the annex. Okay.
You can find more information, yes, in the annex of the framework.
All right. Okay. Thanks. And then another question is related to the SSbD framework when it was still being tested and evaluated between 22 and 24. The case studies there, are they publicly available? That's also a question.
I'm not sure that I mean, we following each reporting phase. That from my slide we saw essentially 2 reporting phases. We received different feedback, including case studies, and we after this reporting phase. We had 2 different stakeholder workshops where we shared the results of this. I mean, we shared the analysis that we did on this feedback that we received. But I don't think the study are public. This case study are public available. I also need to remind that a case study was released by the GRC in 2023, but of course this is a different kind of case study that was more an exercise to test the framework from GRC side.
Yeah. And will it be made available? This is the last practical question.
I am not able to answer to this question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how, if this can be made available or not. We can investigate.
Okay, but we know at this moment it's not available. Okay. Let's maybe now go more into the more content related questions. And I saw 2 questions that were more in the area of, okay, you want to do an LCA already at very early stage, the stage where you don't have that much data available yet. There is mentioning of the simplified LCA to identify the most important life cycle stages and processes for then further data refinement. But then the question is, does that include all potential life cycle stages, so cradle to grave? If so, how can you then define the most important stages? Because you're not sure if you have the most representative and reliable data.
Yes, I see I think I understand the question, and so in the simplified assessment, I can try to reply, and then also I can leave the floor to colleagues, Jersey colleagues, that maybe can provide more information on this. But of course, in an early stage, there might be data might be missing. But I think that is also, I mean, the assessment is a specific step of the framework. So it comes after that, as I tried to explain in the slide with the structure of the framework, it comes later, the scoping and the definition of the SSbD scenario. And there, an involvement of the different actor of the supply chain is needed. So it's at that stage will be clear if which kind of type of information is available or which are not. So it might be that maybe, I don't know, primary data are not available, but still you can have background information for relevant stage, life cycle stage of your chemical. So this is just to say that this kind of evaluation has to be done case by case, depending on the specificity of the system that we are improving and where we are applying the SSbD framework. And I don't know if my colleagues want to add something on this, please. Okay, it seems that.
Can you hear
Grazie,
me?
please. Yes.
No, thanks a lot, Giulio, and thanks for the question. Just to complement on the first part of the question, was about the life cycle stages to be considered in a simplified LCA. As Giulio said during the presentation, typically for a simplified LCA, the focus is from cradle to gate. So this is typically the focus of the assessment. So focusing mainly on the core, so mainly on the manufacturing. And then when moving with the maturity of the innovation, the system boundaries can be expanded, also adding the other life cycle stages, but still in a simplified LCA, from our point of view, some, let's say, considerations also related to the end of life can still be done. So about, for example, the recyclability of the chemical of material. So even though maybe the application of the chemical is not yet defined, still these kind of considerations can be done. Thank you.
All right. I think indeed that might address for now then the question. Maybe another one, and it is still a practical question, I see. So it's about how to best perform time and budget efficient SSbD assessment. So the question is, are there specific supporting tools that would be recommended here? Giulio, we cannot hear you. You're on mute, but
Sarah, I think so. My name's Michael Bennett. I'm part of the team at the JRC. Okay. I think Giulio is having problems both seeing and hearing us, and also being heard and being seen. But just if I try to answer the tools questions initially, and then maybe Grazia and Lucia could complement as necessary. So one of the big initiatives that maybe colleagues and yourself are aware of with tools is the PARC initiative that's been running since 2022, PARC, and that I think that runs until almost the end of the decade, at least 27. I think it's actually 2029. So they are compiling a number of tools both in the LCA, the safety, social LCA, trying to cope with the complete plethora of assessments that is needed in a full SSbD assessment, and also trying to connect nodes, databases, and facilitate matters. The other thing that's maybe, so we have not got really a compilation of SSbD specific tools at the moment. I mean, we can refer to databases, good practice, and so on. So you will see in both the framework, the updated framework, reference, particularly in, say, in the socioeconomic area where some colleagues may not be so familiar, that you have the databases that could be used where you don't have your own data, but you must be aware that they are prescriptive, you need to pay for those. The other thing I would say that is something to watch out for in the next few months is that recently, and maybe some people attended, we had a workshop on the 20th of March in Brussels where EU Horizon Europe funded projects got together with a common interest in SSbD. And a number of initiatives have come out of that. That's still very much at the promise rather than the doing stage, where different people took on the roles within these consortia to share tools, share databases, and to archive material for common use thereafter. So in other words, to avoid the typical problem where an EU-funded project ends and then no one knows where the data has gone to, or the links to the project die after 18 months or 2 years. So we're trying to do that in future. That's being run by DGRTD overall and the consortia themselves. So I hope that kind of approximate answer gives some pointers. I leave the floor to maybe Lucia if you wanted to add anything at all at the moment.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, thanks, Michael. For the socioeconomic analysis, there are tools that are available for social LCA assessment, so that they include data at country sector level on potential social risks. So from one side, I would say they could facilitate the analysis, and for sure they can provide data for filling data gaps from primary data. At the same time, these tools are, of course, commercial databases that have to be bought, and they, of course, are not SSbD tailored, but they can be used to do a part of the SSbD analysis, especially related to the risks. While we have seen from Giulio's presentation that the socioeconomic analysis is not only about social risks, but also other aspects like competitiveness related aspects, critical raw materials, and so on. So I would say that these tools can support a part of that analysis.
Yeah, all right. It is 3 o'clock sharp. I would say maybe one last question. Are there well-defined benchmarks to which industry partners can score resource, cost of goods, and regulations, abiding use and disposal criteria and aspects associated with SSbD of products? So I'm not sure who will take this one.
Maybe I can start since I'm back. Sorry, because I missed part
Hi,
of
Giulio. Hi, back.
Now, here I think maybe Michael can certainly complement, but what should be stressed is again the voluntary approach of the framework that yes is not conceived. Is not designed for regulatory compliance. The framework itself, of course, can help companies, organizations positioning in the right direction. And yes, and this is, I think, true in all the different assessments that are included in the framework, but cannot be. There is not this strong link with let's say with compliance, whatever type of product legislation we are talking about. This is not the final intention of the framework.
Yeah. All right.
The only other thing I would complement that by, if I might, Sarah, is that, as Giulio mentioned, that the two worlds are different. So SSbD, typical commission line, it's voluntary, voluntary, voluntary. You know, so it's not mandatory anywhere at all. But then where we have what was used as some of the inspiration from the benchmarks that Giulio has discussed in the presentation, and that we've worked out so far, part of those took as inspiration the chemicals discussed in the Industrial Emissions Directive BREFs, the best reference guidance documents. And as yourself and colleagues on the call might know, there's an idea in the future to regroup the chemicals related BREFs in the future. So there may be more chemicals covered in each BREF, but that means, of course, that the BREFs themselves become larger in their remit, but there would be less BREFs overall. So I think the idea of that is partly to, you know, because they have a cycle where they go through, they get revised every typically 8 years or more, to speed up the cycle so that it's more contemporary, and to take in data that comes out of the forward-looking insight initiative based in the JRC. So that's where you don't just take TRL completely industry established processes. You look at what's coming down the line from TRL 7 and above, and you may then, a little bit like the SSbD tiered iterative assessment type of process, you start looking at where you might be going, and you look in that direction. So the BREF cycle may be accelerated, and that isn't obviously the only source of information, but the BREF's limits, where you have an upper and a lower bound for certain emissions associated with the production of certain chemicals or products, that starts to be interesting if you're looking for benchmarks. Again, if you're looking for novel solutions and you look at the BREFs, you're not going to find something that was done only this year or even last year, or sometimes even 5 to 6 years ago. It may be 10 years old. So you're certainly not going to be cutting edge, but at least you're going to be good practice, if not best practice. So yeah, that's one answer.
All right. Thank you very much. 5 minutes past 3. So I think it's time to wrap up this webinar. First of all, I would like to thank Giulio and his colleagues from GRC to give this very nice presentation, and also to help addressing all the questions that were raised. There are still a few unaddressed questions. So Giulia, let's have a look in if and when we could address these questions to circulate them afterwards, but without promises. Let's see, we will group them and then check with you on what still can be addressed later on. But I think with this, we actually close our webinar for today. And stay tuned for another upcoming webinar in June, which will be more on biocatalysis, but that's for June. So thanks a lot for your attention, and let's hope to see each other soon in our next webinars. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.